Singapore, a wealthy nation with suffering citizens. Singapore is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, surpassing both the United States and the United Kingdom in terms of GDP per person. However, the people of Singapore are no longer content with their current situation. This island nation, which is approximately half the size of London, has quietly absorbed billions of dollars from China and Hong Kong over the past few years. This lucrative business has made a very small group of people in Singapore very wealthy, but the majority of Singaporeans are in a worse financial situation. Now the younger generation in Singapore wants a change. However, this influx of money has also come with negative consequences. As the country has become more prosperous, the country's prices have skyrocketed and increasing wealth inequality has become a contentious issue in the city-state. In 1965, Singapore gained its independence from Malaysia. Since then, the diligent citizens of Singapore have worked tirelessly to convert their nation from this to. However, the younger generation in Singapore is currently confronted with more difficult issues. In 2023, the median price of a home in Singapore reached $1.2 million US, and the cost of public housing has also increased, making it less affordable. By providing public housing to 80% of its population, Singapore has accomplished a miracle that has resulted in the creation of stability and happiness for the community. Additionally, the success of Singapore has been acknowledged by a great number of other countries. A quarter of Singapore's population has been rehoused in the last 5 years in these bright, modern, airy flats. In recent years, the Singapore government has been laser-focused on attracting wealthy overseas investors to invest and live in Singapore. Now Singapore has become the playground for the rich, pushing up prices and rents. Rents surged by nearly 30% in 2022 alone. It has now become the biggest money laundering case in Singapore's history. It equals about $2 billion US. On the 15th of August 2023, a few hundred police officers in Singapore seized 152 properties, 62 luxury cars, and a big pile of gold bars. These 10 men arrested were originally from China. This is one of the biggest money laundering cases in the world, and the laundered assets are valued at over $2 billion US. Buying a car would cost you 3 times more in Singapore, let alone those luxury cars enjoyed by the money launderers. Now, Singapore's clean image is under scrutiny, and there is increasing resentment towards the rich foreigners living in Singapore. Goodbye, Singapore. To join a golf club in Singapore now costs over $600,000. They are getting this for a golf membership in Singapore because there were so many wealthy people moving to Singapore wanting to play golf. These criminal activities have been going on for years. I don't think the hardworking Singaporeans ever wanted their home country to become a hub for crimes. This guy called Wang Dehai was already on the run and hunted by the Chinese police for illegal gambling. Then he managed to set up a family office in Singapore with his wife 5 years ago. Wang has transferred millions into Singapore, and he purchased a property worth over $17 million US in a very expensive area in Singapore, which is way beyond what the majority of Singaporeans could ever afford. These 10 men arrested were all originally from China but held passports issued by countries from Cambodia and Cyprus to Street Kitts and Nevis. Despite being suspicious of these activities for years, the Singapore government decided to do nothing until recently. It was surprising to me that this money laundering team got as large as it did, went on for as long as it did, and then they just caught them. Some people said China urged them to crack down on it because China wants to keep capital. This Singapore bank called DBS sucked in $529 billion in just over 2 years between December 2019 and March 2023, and the Singapore government has asked the banks to keep it quiet. This DBS bank was stuffed with so much money so quickly that the bank struggled to find opportunities to deploy the funds. According to Bloomberg, DBS Bank had loaned $30 billion to the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS. In a nutshell, MAS is the Central Bank of Singapore, which is comparable to the Federal Reserve in the United States and the Bank of England in the United Kingdom. This is a peculiar situation as central banks often lend money to retail banks and financial institutions as a last resort. The DBS Bank has declined to comment on the $30 billion loan that was given to the Singapore Central Bank. Meanwhile, I discovered that MAS recorded a net loss of $38 billion for the financial year 2022-23, which reflects the effects of tightening monetary policy to bring down inflation. This is the largest loss that MAS has ever recorded. This is how banks make money. They take deposits from us and lend them to other people, making money from the difference. Shango Private and Gaki Investments Private are 2 companies that possess some of the most valuable shopahouses in Singapore. These 2 companies have jointly obtained 9 loans from DBS Bank between the years 2021 and February 2023 to purchase these properties. The director of both of these companies is the same individual, Su Bingji. What procedures did DBS Bank use to conduct checks on its bank customers? Even though the financial services industry in Singapore increased by 7.2% in 2022, which is 4 times faster than the entire economy, a high cost of living has resulted in a record low birth rate in Singapore. This has not worked out well for the people of Singapore. Singapore wanted capital, so they created a regulatory environment for family offices that had no taxes on capital gains. If you got a family office, which is all their gains, they made it very easy to register. So there were minimal disclosure requirements in terms of who you were and where your money came from. Here are the 5 largest financial centers in the world. Singapore is not on the list, but hang on. Singapore has authorized as many investment houses as the UK. Even though the United Kingdom continues to be the world's 2nd largest financial center, the government of Singapore was clearly in a hurry to strengthen its financial sector to take advantage of the money being invested by foreign investors. The wealthy Chinese have established family offices in Singapore to hold their assets, and those wealthy Chinese have also been granted permission to reside in Singapore. This document, which was published by Deloitte in 2020, demonstrates the complex structure of Singapore family offices. The majority of the assets held here are properties, and you need the banks and financial institutions to channel the money through the financial system to purchase those assets. In recent years, hundreds of billions of dollars have been transferred from China and Hong Kong to Singapore. This is due to political instability in China. Hundreds of billions have flown into Singapore, especially in the property sector in recent years, which has made Singapore the most expensive city in the world. Apartments in Singapore cost 15 to 40% more than apartments in London. Food would cost double in Singapore, and if you're even thinking about buying a car, forget about it. The price tag is eye-popping. While Singapore may project an image of prosperity and orderliness on the surface, there is an enormous amount of pressure in society. The government here has a tight grip on what you can and can't do. Freedom of speech is limited, and censorship is a common practice. As a result of the fact that the current government of Singapore is always ready to sue journalists who criticize the government or put pressure on them to make them unemployed or even compel them to leave the country, we rarely hear any negative news from Singapore in the mainstream media. It praises its leadership and the prosperity of the country throughout the day, yet at the same time it allows money launderers to operate freely within the banking system, and they have some of the most stringent laws in Singapore for very minor offenses. Chewing gum is banned, jaywalking can get you fined, and littering is a big no. Caning is a legitimate form of punishment in Singapore for healthy, liable males between 18 and 50, something out of a Charles Dickens novel about 19th century London that persists in a modern city-state, as they call it, in the 21st century. The current Prime Minister, Lee Hsien Loong, has been in power for 20 years. This simply does not happen in any true democratic society. The founding father of the country, Lee Kuan Yew, is Lee Hsien Loong's father, who passed away in 2015. Lee Hsien Loong's siblings publicly accuse him of abusing his power. There are also rumors suggesting Lee Hsien Loong is trying to persuade his son to get into politics. Let's hope not. We remain dedicated to Singapore, and we still feel the call. Do you like it? Kindly give your valuable response in our comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting and informative videos.